أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are now embarking on the new year of the Islamic calendar. The month of Muharram, which is now dawning upon us, marks the end of the last year and the beginning of the new year. And with the coming of the new year of the Islamic calendar, we see that it is not celebrated as other countries and cultures and civilizations celebrate their new year. As we know, in many parts of the world, when the new year rolls about, it is brought about with fanfare, with partying, with celebration, with joy and merrymaking. But in Islam, we see that the new year is marked as a time of reflection, a time of sorrow, a time of grief, a time of lamentation, because it is within this period of the new year, and specifically on the 10th day of the new year, the day of Ashura, in which the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, that is Imam Hussein, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, was slaughtered, was murdered, was killed in the most gruesome of ways at the hands of those who themselves proclaimed Islam. And so within this month of Muharram, we don't celebrate, we don't have festivities or joyous occasions, as this is the way of those who celebrate and who take pride in the killing of the grandson of the Prophet of Islam. And rather we take these opportunities, these days and nights of the month of Muharram and beyond, to remember and reflect upon the tragedy of what happened to Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, what happened to his family, his companions, and ultimately what happened to Islam. That 50 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him and his family, that the nation of Islam could get to such a level of depravity and moral decay that they would be ready and willing and able to shed the blood of the grandson of the Prophet. Today, in this tradition that we want to look at and reflect upon, which comes to us from the 8th Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Radha, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, he shows us the ways of his father when he used to enter into the month of Muharram, and how he had a change within his heart and the way that he actually carried himself within the society. And this is an introduction for you and I to realize that with the coming of Muharram, that we ourselves also have to have a change in the way we think, in the way that we carry ourselves, in the way that we display our grief and emotion and sentiment in these days and nights to come. The 8th Imam, peace be upon him, has been quoted as saying the following statement. Imam al-Radha, peace be upon him, has said, "With the advent of the month of Muharram, my father, Imam al-Kadhim, peace be upon him, would never be seen laughing. Gloom and sadness would overcome him for the first 10 days of the month. And when the 10th day of the month would dawn, it would be a day of tragedy, grief, and weeping for him." This tradition shows us that the 8th Imam, when he would reflect and see the state of his father, the 7th Imam, Imam al-Kadhim, peace be upon him, that his father would go through a complete change of state. As he says that first off, he would not be seen laughing when the month of Muharram rolled around, because this is not a time of fun or festivity. And any of the Muslims who take it as a day of celebration and festivity and merrymaking is simply one who is A, either ill-informed of historical events, or B, chooses to neglect the love of the family of the Prophet, which is an obligation, as the Quran tells us, because to show grief at their times of grief is a injunction that we have, and to be happy when they are happy is an injunction that we're also obligated to follow. And so the 7th Imam would enter into these days not smiling, not being happy, not laughing, not being in a joyous mood. And as the Imam continues, he says that gloom and sadness would overcome him for the first 10 days, meaning that he kept these 10 days as solemn, sacred days and nights to engage in the remembrance of his grandfather, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, may God's peace and blessings be upon him. And as the Imam Radha alayhi salam says that when his father would dawn upon the 10th day, that is the day of Ashura, that ultimate day of sadness and grief, when Imam Hussein and his family and companions were mercilessly slaughtered on the barren plains of Karbala, the Imam says that this would be a day of grief, of sorrow, of weeping for him. And not only for him, but this is obviously a tradition that we also have to take to heart. We have to ensure that within these 10 days and nights that we try to make a change in the way we carry ourselves. We can't be the same in these 10 days as we are in other times of the year, because this is the greatest of tragedies which has befallen all of humanity, as we read about in Ziyarat Ashura. that this is a tragedy which the skies wept over, which the angels wept over, which the animals also lamented about, and which every single human being, Muslim or not, as long as they have an open heart and a clear conscience, if they were to hear of the story of Karbala and the narrative of what happened to Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, and his family and the companions, that they would also shed tears over the grief of what happened on the day of Ashura. So as we begin this new year and we begin to enter into the month of Muharram, let us remind ourselves to have a change within ourselves and to display the grief and sorrow and lamentation over the tragedies of Karbala. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.